All right, welcome to the deep dive. So, we got this article from a listener. Is following coding trends distracting you from real skills?
Hmm. Yeah.
And I thought it would be fun to kind of dig into this. I think it's something that all programmers, think about at some point,
Oh, for sure.
especially, early on in their careers, when they're thinking about, what should they learn? Should they go with the hot new thing or should they just really focus on the fundamentals?
Yeah.
What do you think?
Yeah, it's like this constant pressure to stay relevant, right?
Yeah.
Especially, when you're prepping for those coding interviews or just trying to like keep up with the industry, it's easy to get caught up in that cycle of, oh, I need to learn this new framework or this language is the hot new thing.
Yeah.
Am I going to be left behind if I don't jump on this?
Right, right.
And I think that's where this article really hits a nerve.
Totally. I remember, I don't know, maybe a couple years ago, I spent weeks learning this one language.
Oh, yeah.
Everybody was talking about it, and it was like, it was going to be the next big thing.
Right.
And then it just kind of like fizzled out.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh man, all that time.
Happens all the time. The tech world is constantly shifting.
Yeah.
So it's tough to know, what's going to have staying power and what's just a flash in the pan.
Right.
Part of it's just the natural evolution of technology.
Right.
You're always going to have these new ideas and approaches emerging. But there's also a lot of marketing hype,
Mm-hmm.
companies pushing their latest and greatest products.
Right.
So it's easy to get swept up in that.
Yeah. So this article's argument is like, instead of chasing after all of those trends, we should really be focusing on, those core like coding fundamentals.
Yeah.
So things like, problem solving,
Mm-hmm.
algorithms,
Yes.
data structures, clean coding practices, how to debug your code like a pro,
Right.
and even, collaborating effectively on a team. So all of these things that are sort of the, the foundational building blocks of good software.
It's like building a house.
Right.
Right. You wouldn't just like slap on a fancy facade on top of a shaky foundation.
Right.
The same goes for programming. You need that solid groundwork to build something that's robust and maintainable.
Right. Right. Like, let's say you're faced with, a really challenging problem, like you're building a search function for, I don't know, a website with millions of users.
Oh, yeah.
How did those fundamentals come into play in a situation like that?
Well, let's break it down. First off, problem solving is about more than just finding any solution. It's about finding the most efficient solution.
Yeah.
And that's where understanding algorithms becomes crucial.
Right.
If you choose a poorly designed algorithm, that search function could be painfully slow.
Yeah.
And nobody wants to wait forever for their search results.
Right. Right.
And then you've got data structures, which is all about how you organize and store that massive amount of data.
Mm.
So the search function can quickly find what it needs. So, choosing the right algorithm, the right data structure.
Right.
These choices have a huge impact on how your code actually performs in the real world.
And these skills aren't just for like, the super genius programmers building like complex systems.
Oh, no, definitely not.
They're valuable even for simpler projects, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Even for something as simple as sorting a list of items, there are different algorithms with varying levels of efficiency.
Right.
Knowing which one to choose can make a significant impact on the performance of your code, no matter how big or small the project is.
The article specifically mentions Algocademy as a resource for kind of practicing these skills. I don't know if
Yeah.
you've come across it.
I've heard of it.
Yeah, yeah.
It's a great platform.
Yeah.
And there are others like it out there, too. And they're really valuable for honing your problem-solving abilities.
Oh.
You get these structured learning paths and coding challenges that really force you to think deeply about algorithms, data structures, and how to craft those efficient solutions.
Right. Right. So it's not just about memorizing syntax.
Yeah.
It's about like internalizing the concepts.
Exactly.
So you can apply them to any problem you encounter, whether it's in a coding interview or when you're building a real world application.
Yeah, and the beauty of these foundational skills is they're transferable. Technology changes, frameworks come and go, but those principles of efficient problem solving and elegant code design,
Yeah.
those stick around.
Yeah. Yeah. So now the article isn't saying that, all new technology is bad.
No, not at all.
In fact, it acknowledges that some trends, they actually introduced like valuable new paradigms and solutions.
Right.
Like, think about the rise of cloud computing.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
That wasn't just like, marketing hype. It fundamentally changed how software is built and deployed.
Right.
So understanding those shifts and being able to kind of apply your skills in those new contexts, I think can be really beneficial.
Yeah, I think the key is to approach new tech through the lens of those core skills that we were talking about.
Right.
It's not about collecting buzzwords for your resume, right?
Yeah.
It's about being able to apply those fundamental principles in new and exciting ways.
So before we move on, and look at this code example that the article provides, is there anything from what we've talked about so far that like really stands out to you?
I think what resonates with me is that emphasis on understanding concepts rather than just learning syntax. Because if you can grasp those underlying principles of efficient coding and problem solving,
Yeah.
you're going to be able to pick up new technologies much, much more easily.
Mm-hmm.
Because you'll start seeing those connections, those patterns, and you'll be a much more adaptable and versatile programmer as a result.
I love that. It's about building that like mental framework that allows you to like navigate the constantly changing world of tech.
Exactly.
All right, so let's see these concepts in action. The article has this code example that compares kind of like a trendy framework approach to kind of like a more fundamental approach. You ready to break it down?
Let's do it.
All right, stick with us. This is where it gets really interesting. So we're looking at this code example. For our listeners who maybe don't have the article pulled up right in front of them, can you just kind of set the scene a little bit? Like, what problem is this code trying to solve?
Sure. So the article gives us these two different ways to build a feature. One way uses this like hypothetical trendy framework,
Yeah.
the kind that everyone's buzzing about.
Right.
And the other way, well, it sticks to those core programming fundamentals that we were just talking about.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a really cool comparison, to see how these different approaches, even if they seem to achieve the same thing on the surface,
Right.
can actually have very different implications under the hood.
Right. So both approaches get you to the finish line. But the article's kind of arguing that the path you take to get there really matters.
It's not just about the destination, right? It's about the journey.
Yeah.
And the trendy framework, well, it might seem like the easiest route at first.
Right.
You often get these pre-built functions and abstractions that let you write, really concise code,
Mm-hmm.
get things working quickly.
Right.
But there could be a downside.
Okay. And that downside is?
Well, you might end up with what we call a black box. You're using these high-level functions,
Right.
but you don't necessarily understand what's happening behind the scenes.
Right.
And that can make it tricky to debug things when they go wrong.
Right.
Or to optimize the code for better performance,
Mm-hmm.
or even to extend the functionality beyond what the framework allows.
Right.
You're kind of stuck within those boundaries.
It's like driving a car without knowing how the engine works.
Exactly.
You can get from point A to point B,
Right.
but if something breaks down...
You're calling a tow truck.
Yeah.
Yeah. You're in trouble. All right. So now let's contrast that with, this fundamental skills approach.
Okay.
Now, the code might look a little more complex at first.
Yeah.
You're kind of building things up from scratch.
Right.
But that process of building,
Mm-hmm.
I think, forces you to really think deeply about each step.
You're really in control.
Yeah. So in this specific example, the fundamental approach uses this custom data structure class. Now, I know for someone just starting out, that might sound a little intimidating.
Yeah.
Can you break that down a little bit for us, like demystify it?
Sure. A data structure is basically just a way to organize and store data in a computer so that it can be accessed and used efficiently.
Okay.
Think of it like choosing the right container for your stuff. Right?
Yeah.
If you need to store a bunch of small items that you'll access frequently, you might choose a drawer with dividers.
Okay.
But if you need to store large, bulky items, you might choose a big storage bin. Right.
So the same principle applies to programming. You choose the right data structure based on how you need to use the data.
So in this case, they've created this custom data structure because
they're tailoring it to the specific requirements of the problem they're trying to solve. The article doesn't go into all the details here, but let's say they chose a data structure, like a hash table, for example,
Okay.
which is known for its speed in retrieving data. So this careful selection can lead to significant performance gains, especially as the amount of data grows larger and larger.
So that ability to choose the right data structure for the job, that's a skill that applies, to all sorts of programming situations, right?
Oh, absolutely. Whether you're building a web application, a mobile app, even working with embedded systems, understanding data structures and how to use them effectively is like fundamental to writing efficient, scalable code.
The article also mentions understanding algorithms as being really important in this example.
Right.
Can you walk us through that a little bit?
Sure. Algorithms are basically just step-by-step procedures for solving problems.
Hmm.
So in this case, the fundamental skills approach, it likely uses carefully chosen algorithms for inserting data into that custom data structure,
Okay.
for removing data,
Okay.
and for searching the data.
Right.
And those algorithms, they directly impact how quickly and efficiently that feature can do its job,
Right.
especially as that data set gets bigger and bigger.
So it's not just about, writing code that works. It's about writing code that works smartly.
Exactly.
And that's where those algorithmic muscles really come into play.
And that's why platforms like Aldo Academy can be so helpful,
Right.
because they give you a chance to practice applying different algorithms to all sorts of problems.
Hmm.
And that helps you develop that algorithmic intuition.
I can imagine for someone who's, just starting out, this whole idea of like building things from scratch,
Yeah.
using these custom data structures, these algorithms,
Mm-hmm.
it could seem pretty daunting. Like, it's like choosing to build your own furniture
Right.
instead of buying a ready-made set from.
It's definitely more work up front. But just like with building your own furniture, the rewards can be huge.
Mm-hmm.
You gain a deeper understanding of how things work.
Right.
You develop those valuable problem-solving skills,
Right.
and you end up with something that's perfectly tailored to your needs.
And in the long run, I imagine that deeper understanding makes you a much more adaptable programmer, right?
Exactly.
You're not reliant on the whims of whatever framework happens to be popular at the moment. You've got these core skills that can be applied to any situation.
You're not at the mercy of the latest trends. You've got that solid foundation to build upon.
Right. Now, there's another advantage to this approach that the article touches on, maintainability.
Oh, yeah, that's a big one. Especially in the fast-paced world of software development.
Right.
Code that relies heavily on those trendy frameworks.
Mm-hmm.
It can become a real headache to maintain over time.
Right.
Because frameworks evolve, they release new versions. And sometimes those frameworks even fall out of favor completely.
Yeah. Yeah.
So you might find yourself constantly refactoring your code just to keep up with those changes.
Right.
And that can be so time-consuming and frustrating.
Right. Whereas the fundamental approach.
It tends to be much more robust over time.
Yeah.
Because you built things from those first principles using those core programming concepts.
Right.
You're not as dependent on those external libraries and frameworks.
Mm-hmm.
So even if you need to make changes down the line, you'll have a much deeper understanding of how everything works, which makes modifications easier and less error-prone.
So this code example, I think, really highlights, why mastering those fundamental skills is so important. Like, yes, the trendy frameworks, they can be helpful tools,
Right.
but they should never be a crutch. A solid foundation in those programming fundamentals, I think, is what allows you to build, truly robust, efficient, and maintainable software.
Couldn't agree more. Invest the time to learn those core concepts.
Yeah.
It might feel like more effort up front,
Mm-hmm.
but it will pay off big time throughout your entire programming career, whether you're building, simple applications or tackling those complex, large-scale projects.
Before we jump into the last section of this article, which is all about these platforms like Algo Academy,
Yeah.
is there anything else about this code comparison that stands out to you?
I think it's important to remember that this example, it's meant to be illustrative, not prescriptive.
Yeah.
The specific data structures and algorithms that you choose will always depend on the problem that you're trying to solve.
Right.
But the underlying principle, that's universal.
Yeah.
A deep understanding of those core concepts.
Right.
That's what empowers you to make those smart choices, write better code, and ultimately become a more versatile and effective programmer.
It's like having that toolbox, in
Right.
fact, of knowledge and skills that
Yeah.
you can draw from,
Yeah.
no matter what challenges you encounter.
Mm-hmm.
All right, so let's talk about how platforms like Algo Academy can help us, kind of bridge that gap between like knowing these concepts in theory
Right.
and actually being able to apply them in practice. What are your thoughts on that?
So these platforms, they give you this structured way to learn and practice all those core concepts that we've been talking about.
Mm-hmm.
They've got these interactive coding challenges,
Right.
guided learning paths,
Mm-hmm.
and a lot of them have resources that are specifically designed to help you get ready for technical interviews.
So it's not just like, reading about algorithms
No.
and data structures in a book. You're actually getting to like write the code,
Right.
solve the problems, which I think makes it a lot more engaging.
Way more engaging. Yeah, it's definitely more hands-on.
Yeah.
And I think for a lot of people, that's really helpful.
Right.
Because, a lot of those traditional computer science courses, they can be pretty theoretical,
Yeah.
which is important, to have that foundation.
Right.
But it doesn't always translate directly to the practical skills you need to actually write efficient real-world code.
Right. Right. It's like that bridge between like the theory
Exactly.
and then, what you're actually going to be doing day to day. And
Wow.
that's where these platforms really come in. You're not just learning about, I don't know, a sorting algorithm.
Right.
In the abstract, you're actually implementing it.
Exactly. Testing it,
Yeah.
seeing how it performs. And that just solidifies your understanding in a way that just reading about it can't.
It's like the difference between, reading about how to ride a bike
Right.
and actually getting on a bike and riding.
Exactly.
The real learning happens when you're, out there doing it.
You got to get your hands dirty.
And these platforms, I think, can be especially helpful for, folks who are self-taught or maybe transitioning into a programming career from something else.
Absolutely.
They provide that structure and guidance
Mm-hmm.
that maybe you don't have when you're just kind of learning on your own. I've noticed that a lot of these platforms are starting to incorporate AI into their learning experiences.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Have you seen that as well?
It's really interesting to see. They're using AI to personalize the learning paths,
Mm-hmm.
Based on your strengths and weaknesses,
Mm-hmm.
to give you real-time feedback on your code,
Yeah.
even to offer hints when you get stuck.
Yeah.
It's almost like having a virtual tutor.
Right. Yeah, that personalized feedback, I think, can be so valuable.
Yeah.
Because sometimes you just, you hit a wall, you're working on a problem,
Mm-hmm.
and you just need that little nudge in the right direction.
Right.
So I can definitely see how AI can be a huge asset.
It has so much potential
Yeah.
to make these platforms even more effective.
Mhm.
And, as AI keeps advancing, it's just going to get even more sophisticated
Right.
at understanding, like, how people learn
Yeah.
and tailoring those experiences to individual needs. It's really exciting to watch.
It is. And to anyone listening, if you're curious about, checking out one of these platforms, I would say go for it. A lot of them have, free trials or introductory courses, so you can kind of get a feel for it, see if it's a good fit.
Right.
And we'd love to hear from you. Have you used these platforms? What
Yeah.
is your experience?
What did you learn? Yeah.
Share your thoughts. Okay, so as we kind of wrap up this deep dive, I just want to, circle back to that key takeaway from the article,
Mm-hmm.
which is that mastering those fundamental programming skills, it's not about chasing the latest trend.
Nope.
It's about building that solid foundation
Yes.
that's going to serve you well throughout your career.
It's a long game.
Trends come and go, but those core principles
Mhm.
of, efficient code design, problem solving,
Mm-hmm.
algorithmic thinking, those tend to stick around.
Those are the constants.
It's like we were talking about earlier, building a house on a strong foundation.
Exactly.
You can change the paint color, you can remodel the kitchen,
Right.
but that foundation has got to be rock solid.
It's going to be able to withstand anything.
Yeah. So invest in those skills. And you'll be well equipped to adapt to, whatever challenges
Absolutely.
come your way in this, crazy world of technology.
You'll be ready for anything.
All right. So to leave our listeners with something to think about,
Mm-hmm.
what's one fundamental skill that you could focus on today
Yeah.
to kind of level up your programming game?
What's one thing you can do right now to be a better programmer?
Maybe it's, diving deeper into data structures.
Mhm.
Maybe you need to, brush up on your algorithm knowledge.
Right.
Maybe it's just, practicing those debugging skills.
Yeah.
Whatever it is, I think, even small, consistent effort over time can lead to, significant progress.
It all ends up.
Pick an area.
Mm-hmm.
Start practicing, and don't be afraid to ask for help along the way. The programming community is amazing.
Absolutely.
So many resources, so many people who are willing to share their knowledge,
Yeah.
to support each other.
It's a great community to be a part of.
All right. Well, we hope you enjoyed this deep dive
Yeah.
into the world of programming fundamentals. We hope you found it informative, inspiring,
We hope you learned something.
and we're always here to support you
Absolutely.
on your learning journey. So keep sending us those questions. Keep sending us, your thoughts.
Yeah. Share your struggles with those new trends that you're trying to wrap your head around.
Exactly. Until next time, happy coding.
Happy coding, everyone.